Music of the Soul Prelude, Chapter 4. Laufey sat in her office, a room which was typically kept simple in decoration according to the teachings of simplicity and contemplation. Its four walls were painted white like all the others, bare of any kind of ornamentation, though there were marks on the walls where the paint was whiter, protected by simple pictures and paintings from elders long past. The room was lit by an overhead incandescent light, and by a large window on the east wall to catch the morning sun, and symbolize the sun rising with the eldest, who made those quarters their own. She had always thought that was silly, of course. The sun neither rose nor set on any one person, no matter how great their power. The furnishings, too, were just as simple, suited best in a farmhouse. Her desk was a dark mahogany and well made, more opulent really than anything else on the compound, but there was little she could do about that. It was made a century ago, meant specifically for the eldest to use, and everyone insisted that she use it, but kept simple and tidy, with no carvings or ornamentation beyond a simple black desk lamp and a white ceramic mug with a few branches of lavender painted on it that held a handful of pencils and pens. The two chairs on the southern wall meant for meetings were tall-backed, well-made oak, also with no carving or ornamentation. No cushions, either. Her office was not meant for lounging, after all. Her own chair did, in fact, have some vinework carved into the top of its high back, and even had a cushion on it since she had to use it so much, but she did not like it. To her, it was practically a throne, and she was no regent. True, many, both inside and outside, would call it simple, almost plain, but they did not know what simplicity was. Still, it was functional and lent a weight to her appearance and words when people met with her, giving her an advantage. Aside from the wooden filing cabinet in the northwest corner of the room, and a sturdy, well-made bookshelf with only a few dozen books, all of them dusty and fragile with age, that was all that furnished her office. They taught simplicity in everything, but even the most staunch believers said she took simplicity too far. That was fine, though. Let them think what they wish. This was how she liked it, and each time the eldest took up their role, they decorated their office and living quarters to their own liking, and the opinions of others be damned. Laufey sat with her back to the window, the afternoon sun outside muted by clouds, the grass swaying in the breeze, the verdant branches of the Japanese cherry tree outside her window dancing with the movement of the wind, making a rustling sound that she found soothing. The eldest should not need soothing, or at the very least should not appear to need it, but she did indeed need it. She hated having to order such a stern punishment, particularly to such a staunch believer, but it had been necessary, no matter his reasoning. As it was, she could still be accused of heresy for allowing the girl to live and for being too lenient on Neil, if she was not careful from here on out. There was already a rift between those who had been here for generations and those who had been here for 1 generation or less. Allowing an outsider as old as her was like beating a wasp nest and hoping the wasp did not sting. For years she had worked to mend that rift, to end the bullying and ostracizing of those still considered to be outsiders, even though they had been there most, if not all, of their lives. And if this girl proved to be too difficult, it could undo all her hard work. Worse, if what she thought this girl could be was true, that would be the least of her worries. Her deep thoughts were abruptly shattered as a knock came at the door, firm, but almost diffident. "Come," she ordered, smoothing her features to calmness. It would not do to appear perturbed at all. The heavy oak door opened to reveal a young Latina woman, her tanned skin sheathed in the plain brown robe of a student in training. The light of the overhead light glistened off her smooth ebony hair and reflected off dark eyes that reflected anger and rebellion tightly in check. She recognized the young woman, a child really, barely out of her general studies, but any who had not finished their training was considered a child in her eyes, no matter their age. "Ileana! Are you not supposed to be keeping an eye on the child? She inquired sternly. Perhaps more sternly than was needed, but there was no taking it back now, not without looking like a fool, and the eldest must not be a fool. Yes, eldest, she said diffidently, but a flare of temper in her eyes belied her diffidence. Camille told me to report to you. She did not seem to want to be bothered by the updates I was told to give her. Is that how you speak of a council member, child? She said, and this time her stern tone was earned. No, eldest, Ileana responded, her cheeks coloring. Very well, Laufey said, satisfied that her appearance, at least, of remorse. Give me your report. She is awake. Her name is Krista, and she doesn't remember much of what happened, only that she felt the power and scared people with it. She seems tired and confused right now, and more than a little afraid. I brought her a tray from the kitchen, since she seemed ready to pass out from hunger. Very good, child, thank you. Have the cleaners meet with her, and then you may continue on to your studies. Yes, eldest, Ileana said, a smile broad on her face at her praise as she left the room, carefully closing the door quietly behind her. The child had a fiery temper, one that she was surprised still existed in her, in spite of all her training in their beliefs and all the hours of meditation assigned to her for all her tantrums. But she was also easy to please and had a lovely smile. Laufey rested her elbows on her desk, lacing her fingers together and resting her chin on them, deep in thought. No one had approached her power in 2 generations, and many feared it was because those with special souls interbred with those without special souls. Whatever the reason, she felt both relieved and a little afraid of this child Krista, who could match her in power without having even reached her full potential. This child could unseat her. Worse, she may prove the legends true and possibly bring either salvation or destruction upon them, and no one could tell which it would be. For all their power, for all their miracles they could perform, none could tell the future, and that was most frightening of all. Could this world survive with her in it? Could it survive without her, with what was sure to come? There was no way to know. And yet, there was a part of her that was relieved. Her entire life she had been the center of everyone's attention, praised and fawned over for her power and her potential, and she had hated it. To this day, she still did. At least now people would be focused on this girl's power instead of her own. She cringed, both inwardly and outwardly, at the thought. That she should be relieved because people would finally stop fawning over her power, even though it might mean people losing respect for her and her authority, instead of relief that this child was even alive, was a mark of immaturity in herself that she had thought she had rid herself of years ago. She would have to ask Malik for a penance for it. She could do so, and it would be private so that none would know of it, but that would mean explaining her thoughts, and she would not have those known to anyone if she could help it. No one must know what she suspected of that child or her plans for her. She would have to set her own penance then. It seemed tonight she would go hungry and tired.